Hey guys, in this video I'm going to show you how to display a list of strings in a table view in the most simple way possible. So I'm going to start a new solution. It's going to be a single view iPad application. I'm going to call it TUT10 or TUT110. Let's add our table view to the parent view. So let's find the table. And let's just align it. By default, it's going to be anchored everywhere. Okay, now we can create an outlet for it. Call it table. And go back to MonoDevelop, sorry. And now we need to define our source object. Source class, that is. So add new file. We're going to call it my table view source. Or maybe you could call it something a bit more relevant, like table view string source, because all it is representing strings. You could have large objects in here and define your own cells, cell styles and stuff to display more complex data, but we're going to have the simplest data possible. Okay, so we need to extend UI table view source. I'm going to resolve this. This resides in the MonoTouch UI kit namespace. And we're going to add a member here, private string array items. And we're going to accept strings, different types of strings, maybe a bunch of strings as several arguments or one argument as a string array. So params, string array, items. Okay, in the constructor we're going to assign items to our member items, and we have our data. So our data is now in our defined UI table view source object, but we also need to tell the table view which this object is this object is related to. We want to tell that table view and its cells how to properly display the data. So protected override rows and section. You want to do this first. This is very simple. Just specify how many rows are in a section. We don't really need to concern ourselves with the sections just because of we're not using sections. So we're going to return items dot length. So our rows, our total amount of rows is going to be equal to how many items we have. Now we're going to override the getCell method, implement this. This is simply going to get, we're going to create cells with the appropriate data. And we can do that using this index path argument. There's going to be data sent in here that's going to specify a row index and a section index. And we're going to use the row index to retrieve the data in our items array, the specific data in that array. Okay, so let's define our cell. So UI table view cell. Call it cell. It's equal to new UI table view cell. And right now we can only assign to the text label object here and its properties, just because of the style we're using. And we're going to assign something in our items array at the appropriate row index. So it's telling us it's creating, it wants a cell at this row index. What kind of data should I have in this cell? So it closely corresponds to the items array here. There's no sections or anything. It's just very straightforward to retrieve the appropriate data. Okay, let's just return the cell now. We're not going to try to reuse any cells. It's going to be pretty lightweight and simple. Okay, the last thing we need to do is actually create our source object and define our data, pass it into that source object, and assign the source object to the source property of our table view. Okay, so let's define, we're going to just hard code the data into the constructor arguments. Okay, so we're going to create string, table view string source is what I called it. So table view string source, call it source, is equal to new table view string source. Now we have our string array that we can pass into here. And I use params, so I can do stuff like this. I can do banana, orange, apple, ice cream. And that will work just fine. Now I named or exposed my table as table, and we're going to access the source object here. Or we're not going to access it, we're going to assign to it. We're going to assign our newly created source, UI table view source object, our own special data object. Okay, and that should do it. So let's run it. And there it is. You get your banana, your orange, your apple, and then ice cream.